The Navy SEALs have a phrase for it. If you'll excuse the use of a slightly vulgar turn of phrase, they say, "Embrace the suck." This encapsulates one of the strategies of living in the tension between life in the kingdom of God and life in the world. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, August 26th, 2022. Once again, this week we're looking at H. Richard Niebuhr's book called Christ and Culture, one of the most seminal works of theology and ethics in the last 100 years. In it, Niebuhr explores the variety of ways the church has come to terms with the tension between the Christian community and the various cultures in which different Christian communities exist, or, in his terms, the tension between Christ and culture. Yesterday, we took a very brief look at the strategy Niebuhr calls Christ above culture. This approach tends to view human culture as a sort of corrupt version or analog of the kingdom of God. As one learns the virtues of life in the world, one can progress to see higher virtues, kingdom virtues, and begin more and more to live in them. The problem with this model is that it can begin to identify a particular culture, invariably one's own culture, with the kingdom of God. It can become, in a word, another form of the Christ of culture model. Today I want to talk about the second of Niebuhr's median approaches, one he calls Christ and culture in paradox. Like the Christ above culture paradigm, the Christ and culture in paradox model understands all too well the depth and breadth of human sin. In fact, according to Niebuhr, this model understands it to be even more profoundly true than the other models. The practitioners of this model understand that there is no part of human life or culture that is exempt from the corrupting power of sin, not even the church, not even Christians as they try their best to practice the Christian life. But ironically, it is the realization of the depth and breadth of sin that reveals the beginning of faith, which is the realization of the power and majesty of God's grace. And here's where they shine. For they understand that human beings do not come to the knowledge of God's grace on their own. It is only the grace of God that reveals the grace of God. Hence, faith itself begins not with the human subject, not with us, but is granted first by God. Indeed, one of the ways sin creeps into the life of faith is when Christians begin to believe that faith is a form of virtue on their part. Christians in this regard are no different from non-Christians who believe they don't need God. Christians can also, in effect, declare their independence from God in believing faith is something they bring to the table. As Niebuhr puts it, all human action, all culture is infected with godlessness, which is the essence of sin. Godlessness appears as the will to live without God, to ignore Him, to be one's own source and beginning, to live without being indebted and forgiven, to be independent and secure in oneself, to be godlike in oneself. It has 1,000 forms and expresses itself in the most devious ways. It manifests itself in irreligion, in atheism and anti-theism, but also in the piety of those who consciously carry God around them wherever they go. The practitioners of this strategy of dealing with the tension between Christ and culture, therefore, understand better than most that even our best religious instincts and our highest religious practices are no less infected with human sin than those who stand outside the community of faith. All of which leaves an important problem. If, as Christians, our faith is corrupted by sin, how can we provide any reliable guidance for Christian life, let alone for life in the world? The answer is to speak in paradoxical terms. We are sinners who have been saved by the grace of God, saved, but sinners nevertheless. We are bound to the law, yet free from it. We are sinners, yet made righteous before God. This is the essential strength of this approach. It refuses to collapse Christian faith into one side or the other of the paradox, but lives with the tension. Like the Navy SEALs who embrace the suck, the pain and hardship of their work, the Christian also has to learn to embrace the fact that Christian life is lived in an unresolved tension between sinful and redeemed humanity. The problem with this approach is often that practitioners, in effect, shrug their shoulders, knowing they can't resolve the Christ and culture tension, and so simply give up trying. But this approach has the great strength of reminding us in the church that we stand no less than anyone else under the judgment of God. We just also know that we stand in that judgment already forgiven and redeemed. It's not a question of are we sinners or are we redeemed? We are always both at the same time. This approach invites us to embrace the paradox. Tomorrow, Niebuhr's fifth and final type, one that will feel strangely familiar to us Presbyterians. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.